So this is officially the advanced level of three principles. What are the three principles? So I take it that it's safe to say no, everyone here has learned about these ideas before. Anyone here a beginner? Anyone who's kind of being introduced? Okay, good. All right, well, I'm going to start just by introducing, for me, when I first start to speak about these ideas, I like to begin simply by showcasing where and how, like a context, to see the relevance of it. And that is the very simple fact of moods, of just the experience of moods. How many people here would acknowledge that they have different moods during the course of their life experience? One person does. Several people have moods. Okay, that's good. Everybody else is kind of just even-keeled. Well, I'm not so even-keeled. I find that I have different moods. Now, I might not have always noticed that they were different moods. It might have looked to me like my kids were more annoying at times and less annoying at times. My wife was more agreeable at times and less agreeable at times. But I can acknowledge that there is. I do see even more clear today that I have moods. That there are times where the experience of one of my children reacting, or rather not reacting to a request I make, feels quite unsettling to me, like quite threatening. I'm speaking, he's not listening, he's not responding, he's going against what I'm saying, and it feels like something like an earthquake is unfolding, and I'm upset. And I don't know how not to feel upset, and I'm in a reactive kind of state, And then there are other times, honestly, where I can make such a request, a pretty similar, almost identical scenario in theory, and I notice that I can just kind of look at the situation and experience my child and see that he's in his own world. It's not like I don't care that he responds or doesn't respond, but I can honestly appreciate that for him, he's just truly and innocently engaged in his own world. And his lack of responsiveness is now kind of like it's like a puzzle. I want to navigate this. Is it appropriate to talk to him right now? Is it not appropriate? How would I get it? I have a more reflective moment. Like there's a whole set of choices that are available to me in that moment that in the reactive feeling I don't have. And that's just interesting to me to see that phenomenon. I didn't do that. I didn't summon forth the reactive state where the world looked kind of hot and red. And I didn't summon forth in that moment a slower, kind of more thoughtful, reflective state. I didn't summon that. I can see that I'm experiencing it. I can see that it's a real sensation, but I don't know in the moment how to account for it precisely. And I can see that in my children, and I can see that in my wife. I can see that they're having mood experiences. And it's just interesting to me. It's like a curiosity of sorts. What accounts for the reality of our differing internal states, despite there being what could very well be similar or exceedingly similar external experiences. And the simplest understanding that I've seen to describe that, and that's been so helpful to me, have been these principles. This understanding that there's an inner world that is being governed. It's not just the inner world, it's all of reality. But I guess for the purposes of what I'm describing and sharing, it's kind of like it's an inner world. There's an inner world that's being shaped and continuously formed, and I'm having an experience of that inner world through these three unchanging, constant principles. And so Shaya and I are going to just share a little bit about what we understand about those three principles. So we're going to start. We'll start with thought. Okay, by the way, the three principles, just to be clear, they're really one. It's not like there's three distinct things. They're three aspects of really what is one. It's just that it's helpful to talk about it in a way that there is, on the user end experience, we could see how there's three. So let's start by speaking about thought. Divine thought is, simply put, the fact that there's on a philosophical level, you could say that there's a way in which every little thing in this world is continuously being energized and sustained and provided life, like there's information. There's information in what allows this to be a solid. It's on a scientific level, it's more accurate to say that it's empty space. But there's a whole fantastic organization of electrons and atoms that are moving about in a certain way that is consistent and observable, and there's science associated with it, that they know, all those atoms know how to interact, that somehow there's an energy that you could call thought, right? It's data. It's data that is showing up in the form of life. It's coming from a source beyond, but it's showing up in the form of life. Well, there's, in the same way that there's moment to moment to moment information that's kind of helping organize and animate and direct all of the building blocks of this universe, there's also an unceasing flow of data that's flowing through me. It's like there's like a river. What did Dr. Hurwood say that the recent study showed that there's 70,000 thoughts on average that a person experiences today. The idea of thought is that there's an unceasing flow of information that's showing up in this world, in our experience of life. And I'm having that on a conscious level, that there's new thought. There's new thought, and to a certain extent, it's not visible to me. There's quite a bit of thought I'm not even aware of, but I'm having it. I'm not talking about thought in the conscious, in the sense of, think of 5 things that you did today, right? You could think of 5 things if you wanted to that you did today. We're not talking about that thought. We're talking about kind of the impersonal, constant flow of thought that is simply part of what it means to be in existence. And a human being is having a constant flow of thought through his own mind to a certain extent that's not always visible to him, but it's there. Do you have something? How would you add to that?
How would I add to thought? Yeah, it's like we have the content of our thinking, and then we have kind of the energy of our thinking. And obviously a person who relates to the content of their thinking all day long, so that will kind of run them down. This just in, my life is miserable. This just in, my spouse is terrible. So we have the particulars of our thinking, the content of our thinking, and I think there's just looking at thought in a more universal, divine way, a more larger spectrum of just understanding the very fact that we think, irrelevant of the specific thought itself. Just the fact of thought.
That's what he just said is important. The fact of thought versus the content of thought. The fact of thought is that if you're part of this world, there's a flow of information that is, that's coming through you, that's showing up in this world constantly. If you're a human being, you have thought flowing through you. You have a stream of consciousness, and that's a term that's used in modern literature. Stream of consciousness. It's the ability to see the impersonal nature of how human beings are flowing with thought, and it's all of the universe. The exciting thing about being a human being is that we get to have a little bit of the ability to notice it, to have an experience of it, which I guess would segue nicely into, the second of the principles that are talked about, or that, we talk about consciousness. That consciousness is this ability to have an experience of thought. So it's not that consciousness is the ability to feel one's thought. So whereas, like, I like to give an example of a memory, a memory that I once had of doing, let's say you're reminded of doing something that is embarrassing, right? Anybody ever get visited by a memory of an embarrassing thing they did and feel the effect of that embarrassment? So I could be seated in the middle of like a Beis Midrash learning with my learning partner and have a memory of something that happened years ago, and it was a really klutzy thing to do, and I could feel the pain of that memory illuminate inside of me. Like I could revisit the embarrassment in a way that it comes alive.
That would be like the special effects system.
Right.
Like better than Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, any one of these things. There's a special effects system that brings it alive right in front of you. And that would be consciousness, that it animates your experience. It's like recently I've been thinking about a puppet, like you stick your hand in the puppet and it comes alive. It's like the same thing. It's like that ability, that force that brings our experience awake.
Yeah. It's like it's incredible, the power of the emotional experience. But that emotional experience, now see, what's interesting is that one of the things that you've been hearing over the course of the day's conversations is the distinction between outside in versus inside out. Outside in would suggest that actual people or circumstances are sourcing my feelings, actual events from my past, i.e. memories, the actual events from my past, and therefore the fact that I remember them is enough to arouse an emotional experience inside of me. So I'll just share with you, I've shared this with some people before, but there was one really, really klutzy thing that I did, that I had a phone at one point that I would send texts to people without realizing it. I think it's called pocket texting. And at the time, one of my responsibilities was a fundraiser, and there was one donor who I think he was one of the biggest donors of our organization. Thank God, he was giving over 6 figures a year. And I picked up my phone at a certain point and noticed that I had sent him about like 55 texts within the course of 45 minutes. And after 12 texts, he wrote me back saying, "Can you please stop?" Right? So can you imagine? I picked up my phone, 55 texts or 42 texts in, and it was either 30 or 40 texts prior, he had said, "Could you please stop?" Now in that moment, I wanted to dig a grave and go in, right? I felt such incredible existential pain. Now what's interesting is that several years later, it's funny to laugh at now, let me tell you. So it actually worked out fine, thank God. But I think I got over it and it was fine.
Did he get over it?
He got over it. But then 2 years later, I'm sitting down to learn Bechavrusa with my learning partner after Shachris, and the memory shot into my mind of that episode, and the debilitating pain arose within me again, even though the relationship was more or less fine, and we were still, in good terms, but the pain of that feeling arose within me in a way that I literally could taste that suffering again. And now look at this moment, I'm talking about it, and you could probably tell I don't feel the pain of that, and I can tell you I don't feel the pain. So what's interesting is that in what Shaya pointed out, the distinction between the content of our thought and the principle of thought, or the fact of thought. I could talk to you about the memory itself. The memory is not sourcing my emotional experience, because I can remember that event and feel it in a way that I'm revisiting the pain. I can revisit the memory, i.e. on a content informational level, and be even keeled about it. Because the content of the experience that we're pointing to, the experience that we're having, is not a function of this conscious, it's not necessarily a function of what I know in my mind. It's what shows up from beyond me, from the formless to the form, the gift of thought, which is moment to moment to moment animating inside of me. I'm not sourcing that power. I'm not authoring that power. the Almighty, the intelligence behind all life, is moment to moment renewing this gift of thought, which when I don't know how to direct it or manage it, but I can definitely tell that what I'm experiencing can only be a feeling because of the gift of thought that's showing up in this moment. Yeah, so and that's how consciousness works, is that if I'm experiencing a feeling, it's not because the memory is the memory doesn't have a power to cause a feeling. It's only the gift of thought in this moment that can arouse a feeling state in this moment. That's the only way it can work. So I get to detach the memory from any actual power. I get to live in a truth and a clarity about the fact that the memory itself is not powerful. It's only what God is allowing me to have or not have, what He's allowing me to see or not see in this moment that has any actual real say through the gift of thought and how it shows up in consciousness in this moment.
Nice. I mean, I was thinking about this talk, they put in the parentheses brackets advanced, so I was like, advanced? What am I supposed to say exactly? So I was reflecting upon it, and I was thinking what's something that maybe I shy away from talking about clients with. And I think to share that a little bit, which I think is very essential here in this room, is that it's really what the Gfactor, Hashem, God, that for me it was really what the principles pointed towards is that there's really one source behind life. There's one intelligence. We're raised with this understanding that Hashem is behind everything. But for me, what I always did, and I see many people do this as well, is that we make a distinction. There's Hashem over there, and I'm me. There's the world out there, and there's me, my thoughts, my sensibilities, my perceptions. And really what these principles have pointed me towards, and really I feel like I understand more and more, I mean there's levels obviously, but is that there's really no difference between the outside in and the inside out. It's one thing. It's that Hashem is there and Hashem is here, in my mind as well, fueling it up. And I was thinking the other day also, there's a song, the kid song, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, except for here. No, it's not accurate, right? That Hashem is also fueling our thinking. Hashem is the single source behind all our thoughts as well. So what happens is that for years I've done this, and I probably still do it, and other people as well, I see, is that we say, well, Hashem's out there, and there's some goal I need to get to. There's some elusive goal that if I work hard enough, or if I do something exactly right, or if I, manage, and I work, then maybe one day I'll get close to Hashem. Right? But I see it really not that way anymore, that there's really no place a person needs to go in order to be close to Hashem. There's no place a person needs to go because Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, even in your mind, even in your thinking. That the distinction between the outside in and the inside out is really, it's all inside out. It always is inside out. There always is one source behind our experience. We live in a godly experience. We live in a godly world, And seeing that distinction there's something for me at least that is life-changing. Like when you're spending your life trying to reach some goal that's outside of you, good luck. Maybe you'll reach it, maybe you won't, but it's requires a lot of energy. And over here what the principles have taught me really is seeing that there's really one source behind your experience, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's low. A small example of this, as I was eating lunch, I was sharing with people, like this morning, I got up and I was like, I put my lenses in, and then my lenses fell out. I'm like, one lens fell out, and I'm like, great, okay, I gotta get, just the day for my lens to fall out. I'm like, thank God I wasn't on the road over here, otherwise I wouldn't be able to see anything. So I come back home, like I have one pair of lenses left, and I look in my closet and they're not there. I'm like, oh, great, I still didn't find them, where are my glasses? Anyway, so the point is that like at a certain point I was like, and then I spilled a cup of coffee on me. My wife's like, you're nervous. I said, okay, well, maybe, and then it's just like, the more I was pushing, the less I was getting back. But then it was just like, okay, the awareness kicked in, that, wait a minute. I'm like, trying to swim upstream. Let me just settle for a second, let me humble myself, and it's okay. It's fine. I don't need my contact lenses. I can wear my glasses. It really doesn't make a difference. No one's even gonna know, And just seeing that, like, the reason why I was able to make that transition quick, without making so much meaning out of it, like, what's wrong with me? I'm a klutz. Oh my God, you're gonna be giving a talk on this soon. And, oh, what's wrong with you? Can't even get your own stuff together. All that chatter just quieted. Why? Because there's only one source behind our experience of life, God. Another way to say that is thought in the moment, as many presenters, because it's divine thought. So there's no need to split our experience of life. It's not a spouse problem. It's a misunderstanding problem. It's not a child problem. It's a if I think my kids or my wife is the cause of my feelings, well, the bigger the misunderstanding, the more the suffering. So when you just boil it down, and really there's something about the language here I was sharing before with other people, that the English language and learning it in this formulation, in this terms, is something that is extremely beneficial, because that's what we speak, that's what's around us, that's what we absorb. And some of these terms that even emunah, faith, it could sound like very abstract. It sounds like, oh, what's that? I got to do that, But there's something about the English terms over here that is extremely helpful to people. It was for me, and I see it as for many as well.
I think we just dealt with, we have a question, which is perfect. So we kind of, the mind, divine mind as the third principle is simply what we've already been speaking about, that the through the gift of thought, new thought shows up. But again, not thought that we can point to and be able to describe. It's this kind of magical gift that's showing up moment to moment, and that we get the ability to feel through this gift of consciousness. And of course, what's authoring the whole thing, our ability to see that, our ability to experience it, even our ability to have insight about it, is a gift from the single author. And so let's hear some questions, because that might help fill out the conversation. God.
It's God in our minds, and it's God everywhere, and it's Hashem that's doing everything, and it's giving us the thought. Universal, divine, mind, not this kind of thought, but the other kind of thought, or whatever. Like, God just wraps it all up.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's just so much more helpful.
You prefer that it's helpful to you when you hear it being described just as God.
Because that's just what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
you can't beat around it.
She's pointing out that it just seems to help to describe it as God, as opposed to something other, some mechanism, I mean, I guess it's interesting to me to see the gift of, to talk about, truth be told, I don't really use the three, I don't talk about the three principles today when I teach these ideas. I kind of, I speak about it. I guess each, teacher comes to teach and speak about it in the way that they find resonates. But absolutely, for me, the biggest insight in this whole process has been to realize that, like Shaya was saying, I kind of I believed in God, and I believed it was important to develop an understanding and belief in God. I just didn't see that there were a whole bunch of things that I didn't know God was doing and that I thought I was responsible to do. I thought I was responsible to make my mood. I thought I was responsible to develop a certain feeling inside of me. I really thought that I was on the hook. And when I was not having a feeling that I wanted, it looked to me like I was failing. And I don't know how you guys do when you feel that you're failing, but it wasn't bringing out the best in me when I thought I was failing on an ongoing basis, It just got my mind busy with an undertaking that I wasn't well suited for, and it just completely cluttered a beautiful wisdom. I always come back to this verse. Asa Elokim esa Adam Yashar. God made people straight. There's a very powerful, simple wisdom that exists within each of us that is not of our making. I didn't make it. I'm not responsible for its upkeep. Also Elokim esa adam yashar. And then the continuation of the pasuk is, Vehem bikshu cheshbonos rabos. It's people who run after, who seek calculations and strategies, and that obscures the yashras. So I didn't realize that I was innocently obscuring a power within me that was not of my making, that was not on me to manage or maintain, but yet it was my biggest resource. It was my biggest asset. I don't see this as a way of avoiding responsibility in life. On the contrary, it allows me simply to know what I'm not on the hook for and what I am on the hook for. And if I know what I'm not on the hook for, then I step away from confusion, and I am present to the real job of my life, which is, first and foremost, to me, I always say, the beginning of all hishtadlus, the beginning of all effort, is to know what's true and to know what's not true. That's the beginning of all effort. After that, there's plenty more choices and effort to make when you see clearly, what's in front of you. But the beginning of all, most typically what I find when people start to learn about these ideas, the question that comes up is, okay, but what do you do in the moment when you're upset? These are all beautiful wisdom principles, but what do you do in that time of anger or reactivity? Honestly, the only thing I know to do is to look back to, well, what do I know is true? And what do I know is not true? Does that mean that I'm going to dissolve my anger and be peaceful? Not necessarily. But I also know that I'm comfortable with, at least at times, not always, but on a broader scale, I'm becoming more comfortable with the truth of my inability to program my emotional state. And as I become more comfortable with my inability to program my emotional state, I become more comfortable with what is in my purview, which is, okay, what do I know is true? What do I know cannot be true? That's already an accomplishment. It's a tremendous accomplishment to know what's true about the nature of life and to know what cannot be true. I mean, in Jewish terminology, I would say that's, there's something called the Sheish Mitzvahs Tamidius. There are 6 constant commandments. One of them is Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim. Don't have powers other than God. For me, in the moment of anger, to look at my child or my wife or to whomever I'm feeling reactive toward, and to have some glimpse, to have some choice to recognize, I know something about this. I know something true about this. I know something that cannot be true about this. To me, that's a fulfillment of that mitzvah, which is an extraordinary success. And I got news as well. Aside from the fact that it's an extraordinary success, it's not possible that you see that and understand that even on some level and not feel and not be changed by it, because the yashras is there. It's like, because the main thing is not to get in my way. The main thing is not to run after the cheshbonos that obscures the presence wisdom that is so helpful. All the ways I've navigated, all the ways that each of you have navigated your life, that continue to navigate your life, in ways that you couldn't describe how you did it. You did it, in ways that there was so much simple wisdom present in how you did it. And that's the simple wisdom that's going to help us more than anything. So,
Rabbi Harris, I like what you were saying about manufacturing emotional states. It's not on us to manufacture our feelings. That was like huge for me. Now I like to call that being okay with not being okay. So if I'm bent out of shape, that's fine. Who says I can't be bent out of shape? If I'm stressed, it's not a big deal. But when you have what used to happen to me, let's say this morning when I spilled a cup of coffee on my cup, I used to start conjuring up all sorts of things like, you see, your life is unmanageable, what's wrong with you, you can't handle this. Then it goes to, it's your wife's fault. I always say there's 3 things a person needs in life: food, shelter, and a person to blame. But the point being is like seeing that there's this system that's there for us, and we're not in charge of our emotional state in that way to kind of constantly generate feelings. You know, even for myself in Yiddishkeit and learning, every time I used to finish a sefer, I used to feel worse about myself. Why? Because I would say, look, I'm doing that to make myself happy, and I still don't feel happy. Right? So I used to hold it against myself. And I was accomplishing a tremendous amount, and it was running myself down. Now I learn. I love learning. I actually have a class online. It's 2,000 subscribers. Sign up now. Just joking. It's called Nach Daily. And but it's because I like learning. I'm not using it as a tool to make myself feel good. See, that comes from the inside out. That's our gift from God that we have. But I'm not looking in that direction. Now I should use that thing to make me feel good. Right? That would be misunderstanding. And just the byproduct of that, though, the way I got there is just simply this simple understanding that our life works from the inside out. That thought creates our experience, or Hashem creates our experience.
I can't hear. Say it again.
I'm curious how you answer to that concept of A, working on yourself, that you shouldn't be angry, that you should feel in order. And this is a separate question, it might be kind of the same. But also sometimes I'll have clients who are so mad at themselves for being so mad, because they're trying to be good Jews, and they're not supposed to feel. Of course, I'm answering how I answer, but I'm just curious to see how, I don't want to give my answer, I want to hear what you will.
So question number
The
one.
concept of working on yourself. In other words, it's
Right.
a certain thing that's giving you certain power to say you can't control your anger. I personally think it's your action maybe, but there is a concept that, you know, the Chafetz Chaim used to yell at himself. I mean, this is the Chafetz Chaim, you know, you should be angry, you're nothing, this. Okay, that is working on it. That's been a physical effort, right? So I'm just curious that, and then also when you have people that come to class and then say, I shouldn't be angry, right? I should be better than them. It's a noble team and the whole that.
What would be a Jewish response to that?
Can-
We answer that by the principles.
Can I take a stab at the first
Yeah,
question?
just let's restate the
Okay.
questions.
Uh,
Question number one was, how does this understanding kind of coincide, or how does it work together with a Jewish value of working on your midos, working on your character, the responsibility to directly make choices and effort to develop yourself? Is this at odds with that? And then second, when a person is consumed with anger at him or herself for his emotional state, what might we say to that person?
Yeah, from a principle.
So
From a principal's
I
perspective.
think on working on your character, midos, there's an inherent problem with working on yourself, which is how can you solve yourself with yourself? How can you fix your midos if your midos are bad? Now you're supposed to improve them, but if your midos are bad to begin with, how can you solve yourself with yourself? There's an inherent problem there. So I think the principles come and answer this, because we're receiving thought anew from moment to moment to moment. It means we're receiving batches of new thought. It means like Einstein said, the same thought that got you into the problem is not the same thought that's going to get you out of the problem. So something new needs to be introduced to the equation. So the principles explain that we get new thoughts, actually. So now you could work on your midos. You don't have to solve yourself with yourself because something new is coming in, right? You have new intake. But if you're holding on to your thinking like rock steady, like, oh my gosh, my wife or my kids or my boss, traffic, whatever, it is, so you're not receiving anything new now. Well, you really are, but you're just not aware of it, right? So the principles actually free you up now to work on your midos. They actually free you up now to work on yourself.
And it's a meaningful, like I was saying before, it's a tremendous mitzvah to know what is true about what's causing things in this world, and to know what's not causing those things. To me, that's how my orientation in this whole undertaking is, that I've been helped to have a much simpler, clearer understanding of the mitzvah of idolatry and the mitzvah of emunah. You know, I didn't notice how I was ascribing power to all kinds of things so that aren't God. So that is an understanding. You can't develop anything in this world without knowing what's true. Working with falsehood is not a way to build, you know. So I guess that would be my understanding of how a Jewish response would be to how this is consistent with developing one's character. And then in regards to question number 2, you want to
take a stab at it. You're saying about clients that come and start blaming themselves because they're not doing it right, or they're blaming themselves for their feelings?
They'll go to a class and you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't have those feelings. And I don't think that the Torah means it in the way it's taught.
Uh-huh.
You understand? I think that it's the easier way to say it, or there is no words. It's such an intangible thing that you're trying to
That people come away from it. People can come away from a Torah class thinking, I should not get angry, but I'm getting angry. I am so against the Torah.
No, I'm a bad person. I don't know how to do this thing.
Right,
I
right.
can't think of like, whatever.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, something that, I don't know, I've certainly encountered that experience before. Not because anybody told me that, because I came to that conclusion. I am so unable to do Torah, you know.
The Torah hates me.
Right.
I mean, one.
You have to really see that, because that part is key to at least get out of the outside and at least start looking on the inside.
Well, one thing that I would say, you know, misunderstanding, I think that was cleared up for me is that, and I want to be clear about this, like, it's not about chasing a good feeling, you know, or like chasing a high or always wanting to feel good. Now, it's good, you know, it's nice to feel good, it's a good thing, you know, but it's not about like, I need to get that feeling or I need to get to that place or something like that. But just understanding how our experience is created, I feel like the catch-22 is that you end up you blame yourself less for your lower end feelings, and in return, they tend to pass faster. Now, I'm not saying that you should search for that good feeling per se, you know, or it's definitely going to pass faster. But what I find is that, like, what it did was when I used to only want good feelings even before I came across the principle. You know, I wanted good feelings and I didn't want bad feelings, but the principles actually normalized all feelings for me because I didn't feel responsible for every feeling that I had now. So like if I was feeling angry, or when I do feel angry, upset, nervous, feel everything that everyone else feels, right? So it took the blame off me. It was like, all right, I'm feeling like this, you know, like, it wasn't, you know, and I think the deeper a person sees that all feelings are godly and all feelings are divine, you know, so you could live with Hashem anywhere, you know, even in the choshech, you could go right in there, you know, but the point is that, like, I stopped splitting my experience, like, I don't think about it. In return, the catch-22 is I happen to feel better more often, but I'm not, like, chasing that. I'm not looking for that high or looking always to feel good. And when the feelings became normalized for me, like, oh, I could feel angry, it's fine, it's not a big deal, like, the levels went down and the duration went down and the frequency went down and the intensity went down, you know? And there was just something about seeing that it's normal, that it's part of the human experience. You know, I even learned about, this is a tangent, I even learned about like certain tzaddikim, like I even read about the Arizal one time, he was only able to stay on his level for 8 hours at a time. Now that's a big deal, you know, I'm not making little of that. But after that, he had to come back down. Or David HaMelech, this is very tangential. David, he was a Navi. So, but Tehillim is in Kesuvim, which was written Baruch HaKodesh, a lower level, right? But he was a Navi, it could be in Nevi'im. Why wasn't it? Because he was on a lower level when he wrote it, which means like all people go in and out of feelings, right? And that's normal. Even great people, even righteous tzaddikim, I'm not trying to diminish them. So when I saw that, like, oh, this is why. Because you're not necessarily always responsible for your emotional state, that evened out for me. You know, that was like, oh, okay, I could feel angry. It's not I could be in a low, it's not a big deal anymore.
Yeah.
A couple of things. One is, you saying it's not our avodah like you said, when you get this memory of those messages.
Yeah.
You get it now, you don't feel nothing.
In this moment, I mean, it could show up in a moment where I feel the pain of that, mistake.
So sometimes it's going to show in a way that you're going to feel it, sometimes not. When it shows that you feel it, our avodah is just feel it and come out, or you're still going to avoid that person has to doubt it's true, or what do I do in that moment? And not get upset and not go cuckoo, but there isn't a way that a person knows it. But what happens if I had a feeling like that with my wife, and I get it again? I say, oh, now I got it again, so be careful, it's time to get it again. You got to work then too. It's not let the feeling be and accept it, and wife, you have to accept me now. That's what it says. Like,
Meaning, like, let's say you get angry and upset toward a person in your life.
no, the moment this feeling comes and you're accepting it as a feeling that we don't know why. Now it's true. It's true that sometimes a thought makes you feel something, and thought doesn't make you feel. When
Right.
it does make you feel something,
Yeah.
it's nice to know that it's going to go away. It's nice to know that
Yeah.
that's the human experience.
Yeah.
But even then, even if you know it's going to go away, you got to do something about it now too.
Well, you got
Can't
to.
get away.
There is an avoda, but look, sheva al taseh is also an avoda. Sit. Don't just do something. Stand there is also an avoda. Like to know what is Shlomo Melech says. Kishetale alecha ruach hamoshel. When the ruach of the moshel is the yetzer. When the spirit of the moshel comes upon you, mekaimcha al tanach. Don't leave your place. There is an avoda in staying put. It says, Lo sasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. Don't run after, right? Which is, if you're thinking about, let's see, these are my thoughts, and the mashal of the simple metaphor of the pasuk. I'm going. He's making me angry. Why is she doing this to me? But if I were to stop, these things are going. It's an avoda to stay put. That's a meaningful thing. And the way, to me, it looks is to stop and just ask myself, what do I know is true? What do I know cannot be true? It hurts. I don't like the feeling of anger. I don't like the feeling of regret or shame or inadequacy. I don't like those feelings, but there's something I'm learning about them that allows me to stand in those feelings without the need to change the feeling. I'm learning something. Kishetale alecha ruach hamoshel, mekoimcha al tanach. It continues. That's not the whole pasuk, but I also liken it to a very helpful metaphor. I've said this many times. To me, it's so helpful. It says we read it in Parshas Noach that Iker toldoseim shel tzadikim ma'asim tovim. The metaphor that Chazal say for doing good actions in this world is birth. I know that birth involves contractions and dilations. That's the only way. In the midst of a contraction, it hurts. What are you going to do? I don't like the feeling. What do I do about the contraction, Rabbi or doctor? Well, you're giving birth. What do you want? But when you understand more deeply that the human experience you're giving birth. The Almighty is going to have you give birth because you're here for nisyonos. You're here to bring forth the divine in a new way. That's just it, and there's only one way birth works in this world. So when you see that more, when you get comfortable with that truth, then it's not personal that you're in the contraction and you can't do much in the contraction, but it's a very meaningful thing that I'm standing in the contraction and I'm like okay with it on some level, and when the baby's going to come, I don't know when the baby's going to come. A woman doesn't know how long the judgmental feeling or the angry feelings, I don't know when it's going to subside. I just know that doing what's true and knowing what's true is success. To me, the opportunity to have a successful avoda no matter what state of mind I'm in, is so meaningful to me. Because it used to look like I'm a failure by virtue of having a low state of mind. Now I realize, it's nothing to do with my success is in what I'm acknowledging is true, what I'm acknowledging is not true. That's, to me, the beginning of Bechira. And then that opens the door to new opportunities of understanding in Bechira. But the beginning of Bechira, and that's why I think it says, Reishis Chochma Yiras Hashem. You know, the beginning of all wisdom is to have an understanding of what's true.
Chachmas, thoughts.
Right. The beginning of all understanding is what is true, what's not true. That's Yiras Hashem. And then from there, there's so much more will come, but not because I made it, just because...
Like an example, you know, like let's say me and my wife get into a squabble before we go to bed at night, you know, classic. It always happens at night, right before we go to bed. You know, I'm tired, she's tired, and whatever it is, we start arguing about something. So we say words to each other, whatever they might be, you know. Like I'm just joking. So but what happens is let's say the next morning, or we acknowledge it like, okay, we're both tired now. Like we know the truth of our experience. Like I know she really doesn't have the ability to cause a feeling in me. Like I know the truth of that. Like, and that's awesome. It's awesome to know that, because what happens is if you don't know that, the next morning you wake up and you say to your spouse, we have to resolve this. You still talk to your mother way too much, right? I know we went to sleep last night, but this is not over because I'm waiting for her to make me feel a certain way, right? I'm living in a lie. I'm living in an illusion, right? I'm living in falsehood, in a misunderstanding that something other than thought is creating my feelings, you know? So knowing that the truth, like you were saying, knowing the truth of our experience, boy, is that helpful. Boy, is that, because I don't wake up the next morning and say, you know what? You really do speak to your sister way too much. And, you know, I didn't like the way you spoke to me. And you carry last night's, last week's, last month's, last year's argument.
Unless you do wake up with that feeling.
Yeah.
But then you know something about the feeling the next morning, right?
Yeah.
Like in other words, knowing this doesn't insulate us. It happens to be, as Shaya said, that the nature of the ups and downs, it changes. It's just that it doesn't lend itself to more management. It just, by virtue of getting out of the way, the body of your work will start to grow, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the senior partner in our lives. I have a crucial role to play, but he's still the senior partner. He's still the one who's most accountable for the progress that my life is making, hands down. So officially we're done with our session. And I think that actually Mincha is meant to be starting across the hall in a few minutes. So, yeah.
One of the things that I always was thinking, Taken Olam B'Malchut Shakai. When I came to the principles, it was like, here it is. Because the Taken Olam B'Malchut Shakai, it's bringing Hashem, you know, we should see it in the world. We should feel it, and like you were saying, it's like Hashem and me. And when Malchut Shaddai means I'm bringing Hashem Malchut Shaddai when I live this way, through the presence of Hashem, through the presence of Hashem, through this feeling constant. Mamash is Malchut Shaddai. This is Malchut Shaddai.
That's right. I get to be a different. There's more HaKadosh Baruch Hu in my life when I'm not trying to manage my life overly, you know? Yes?
Yeah, I just happened to say something.
Please.
I understand the attempt to translate the principles into Judaism. I understand it. And I also understand the need to make things more simple and quiet, etc. But I keep thinking that somehow there's a big part of all this that's against Jewish tradition as I know. Meaning, in Jewish learning, one of the biggest pleasures for myself and many other people is the non-closure and the non-simplicity and the what I just said. So every upheaval. And we know that Torah is the hidden. I mean, it's going to give rise to endless oral tradition and endless commentaries, blah, 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 which beautifully complicate and continue to open the problem of life. So I guess there are moments I get kind of like, doesn't feel right. And there was one specific moment which has been bothering me, and I would like to bring it up, where one of the speakers said when Sydney realized what he realized, it was like Abraham. And that really got me. It was like, what? I mean, it really got me. And I thought, wait a minute. Our whole tradition, and perhaps the Muslim tradition as well, is founded on Abraham being the one who was the first prophet. And we know what prophecy means, which is not about, I'm in a good mood, I feel great, prophecy means prophecy. And even prophets only receive prophecy when they're in the right place.
That's how they profited.
Right. So comparing Sydney to Abraham, and I know it was said it's in passing, but it kind of upset me as a Jew. Like, what? So
I can relate to that. I can relate to that.
I think the two things I'm saying are connected about simplicity and reducing in order to feel less anxiety, which God knows we all want to feel.
Right.
And a bigger vision about what Jewish teaching is really about. It's really not about getting quiet. It's not about getting quiet and being quiet.
So you're saying the goal of Judaism is not about being quiet?
No, it's not. It's different than Buddhism, and it's different than, but I think it's different than Christianity and Buddhism and everything. And I think if we start losing that, we're losing the essence of who we are.
I would agree that there is, I don't see the principles and what Sydney Banks has taught people as somehow representing something that is identical to or in any way a substitute for, God forbid, for what we know to be Torah. I think it's helpful. Yeah, so I'm not comfortable with that comparison. I don't think that Sydney Banks could really know what Abraham saw and what he experienced. And as impactful and as meaningful as his teaching has been to many people, I don't really see the need to, kind of compare and contrast them. Suffice it to say, the principles have been a helpful resource to me in seeing Torah seeing something in Torah. I'm looking to Torah. It happens to be that there are resources in the world that have been of help to me to see Torah more deeply. That's my orientation. I just want to pause for a second because I don't know what's going on with Mincha. Oh wait, we're on till 3-4. What time are we on till? Oh, we have 5 more minutes.
Okay,
oh, yeah. Look at that. See, I thought that I'm supposed to finish by a certain time, and I didn't need to, and that was making everything complicated.
And that created your experience.
And just creating my experience.
But it got misunderstanding, cleared it up. See?
There you go. Okay, so yes, but I just want to pause for a second because I'm not sure I want to go into the Judaism and principles thing. Is that okay? Like I would prefer it was. No, that's fine.
I would
Fine.
say very broadly, there's an array of speakers coming from different places, and if there's something that you hear that really rubs you the wrong way, so it wasn't meant for you then, if something, because we hear things and different things resonate, different things don't, and sometimes a person's antenna goes up, and it's certainly not meant to raise anyone's antennas, so if there's something, that you really.
I think prophecy is not a little thing.
No.
Sure.
No,
Sure.
It's
It's one of the biggest things for all people, not just Jews.
Yep. Yeah, it's a.
Even having a realization or even being Einstein.
Yep.
Sure, 100%.
Now
I'm just wondering if you think 3 days of a seminar talking about God is here, just like He's Hashem.
3 days of what?
I'm just saying, like, talking only of how God is in us, and not only what the circumstances, what He's giving you in life, and the way we grew up and knowing Hashem does this, Hashem does that, but also that Hashem is, the way you just said it, that Hashem is you, and all your feelings are coming from Hashem. We spend 3 days with that. I think it would just do.
This is consistent with the point
response.
you made before, that you feel that there is a way
I feel like I'm trying to
translate it to
not translate, but like understand it, and so many different.
It's there.
It's just so powerful, and if you spend 3 days hearing this, you're a changed person. You're like, it's just so clear to everyone.
The quote is, "In simplicity lies complexity," you know, and it's on one hand, it's very, very simple, right? Your thoughts create your feelings. We live in an inside-out world, and nothing could affect you but thought, right? It's a very simple thing, but yet, on the other hand, and this is the advanced class, you know, how do you speak about something that has a spiritual quality that's formless in nature? You know, and I think this is something that all the presenters struggle with. We're talking about these psycho-spiritual principles that are larger than life, you know, and so how do you talk about that in a way, you know, that would be understandable and grounded in a way that's palatable to a person, you know? So I think, you know, on one hand, it's very simple, you know, to appreciate the simplicity of it. On the other hand, you know, to address partly of what you were saying, that in simplicity lies complexity, you know, like it's very, you know, very deep waters at the same time, you know, and I could just tell you from my own experience as a from Jew, you know, like there are so many things in Yiddishkeit that I never would have thought possible for me had I not come across this understanding. You know, like I get up early in the very early in the mornings for me at least now, and I spend a great deal of time learning before I wake up the kids. You know, and had I had so much thinking around sleeping, and you know, it was a no-go. Or even this Nach Daily program I mentioned before. The rabbi called me up once a month for 2 years to do it, and I was like, no, I'm not doing it. You know, I was so insecure. And then I learned the principles, and it was like, oh, I could do it. Look at that. It was just like, boom. You know, so it's not to replace Judaism or Yiddishkeit or any of the profundity and depth there, you know, but at the same time, there's something about learning it that certainly enhanced things for me. You know, there are certain benefits that I received that freed me up. Like when you have so much pictures on your cell phone, you have to delete a bunch so you can have more. And your mind is so full, how much of Yiddishkeit can you do, right? Because you're so worn out from your experience of life. There's no room to do. Learn more. But I'm exhausted. Do this. You get up early. How am I going to do it? You're full. But there's something about learning how our experience is created that deletes the pictures, that frees you up. So now you're back in life. Now you're back in the game. Now you could perform, you know, or move in the direction that you'd like.
And I would just say, you might have something to teach that you're seeing in how this is, you know, there's a sensitivity you have to how this is shared and the language and Hashem. Who knows?
I have no issue with hearing it the other way. I just feel like it's just another way versus direct. It's like shortness right there. It's Hashem. Like, why are you being around the bush? Like, just say it the way it is. What are you afraid of?
If I might say from first grade or starting from young, my mother and my teacher, they told me the short way. Kind of if you, same thinking of what I know now, but I think the principles help me come to that way in a more short way.
The principles help you to see simple wisdom that you are being exposed to.
That I was seeing, but I was not seeing, which I was exposed to, how simple it could be. And, I think for people coming into the principles in all different stages and whatever they see at that time, I see it being the way it is very helpful for myself.
It can be. There's no question. People come in with certain ways of thinking about Jewish terminology that they don't necessarily hear the freshness of a new message. But on the other hand, there are people who are sensitive. I don't have an answer for that except to say that I believe there is something of real value and truth to this conversation. Otherwise, I wouldn't be helping organize a conference. At the same time, I honestly don't teach the principles as the principles at this point. I just have come to see on it kind of organically, I guess I have a little bit of a bias to seeing it in Torah. And so now that's what I talk about. I like it. I don't know how to.
You are a rabbi, Rabbi Harris. You are a rabbi.
But it's not like I have. I don't see it as a cause. I just see that I have satisfaction from it, in seeing where Torah is pointing to this wisdom. And of course, I believe that there's differences. Torah is pointing to something that is. It's different, you know. So to be continued.